nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Well, Liz, you must be canvassing a lot. It looks like you might be losing your voice soon.
Yes, my voice is scratchy at all times.
Well, welcome to the show. Happy Sunday. Are you, by the way, are you an NFL fan? There's some games going on today. I don't know.
I am not. My husband is. He's watching.
What team is he rooting for?
Sadly, he's a Cowboys fan.
Oh.
So he's just sad a lot.
America's team, as they like to say. Yes.
Right.
Well, I am so excited to have you on for a couple reasons. One is because I know you've been following the Yang 2020 campaign with great interest. Two is that you've been following it from a very important state, the great state of Nevada.
Yeah.
And three, that you also have made the decision to seek public service and make a run of your own as a state senator. So we have a lot to discuss today. And just thanks in advance for agreeing to come on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
All right. Well, so I think the format we're going to do is first half, we'll talk about the presidential primaries, and we'll go over the staples like the polls. We'll talk about this Iowa debate. That'll be fun. Then we'll look at some data from Google search trends, YouTube searches, Twitter activity, and then we'll look at some presidential odds making from the gamblers. Then we'll, after we've talked enough about what's going on with the Yang 2020 and kind of presidential race, we'll shift gears and talk about the Becker 2020 campaign.
All right.
Sound good to you?
It does.
All right. So first, I think what we'll do is take a look at these polls. I wish they looked different, but you know what? The data is what it is. So let's take a look at them. So here are the latest national polls. So if I go here, the most recent one was the Economist YouGov one that was until Jan 7. And, you know, Yang came in at 3, and then Morning Consult had him at 4, and Harvard Harris at 3. It's been a struggle. And I think a lot of us were hoping for a bigger bounce after the December debate. But I was curious, like, what are your thoughts in terms of like the national mood? The national mood seems to be definitely gravitating towards Biden, Sanders, Warren, and has been kind of stuck there for a while.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. In Nevada,
break it down, Liz.
In Nevada, it's a little different because we're kind of in our bubble, and we talk a lot about how the national polls, they really don't mean anything because they're not going to mean anything until people have actually voted. And I really wish that there were more state polls with a lot more people in them instead of a sampling size of, 300 or less, because I don't know that means much either. And tying into the discussion you had a couple weeks ago about media bias, the way that our media works, it's like a positive feedback loop for the people who already have the media coverage, and it's a negative feedback loop for the people who don't.
Yep.
And I just want to see a substantive discussion of issues. And I feel like the media doesn't a lot of times do a substantive discussion of issues. They talk about what they want to talk about because they have their own messaging that they want to push. So national polls are just not very interesting for me.
Yeah. And if you look at the state polls, I guess there was one in, and I'm so sorry. How do people who live in Nevada pronounce Nevada?
It's Nevada. It's so hard because if you pronounce it phonetically, it looks like it should be Nevada, but it's Nevada.
Okay. So like you're on the ground in Nevada, and there was a Fox News poll that ended Jan 8th, and it had Yang at looks like around 4%. behind Biden at 23, Sanders at 17, and Warren at 12. Ooh, Steyer. It had Steyer at 12 in Nevada. Crazy.
Yes, Steyer's spending a lot of money here.
Yeah. So what's it like on the ground? Like, are you feeling that energy for Steyer? And like, why are people like fired up about him?
Well, full disclosure, I'm working the caucus. I'm running my caucus location, and so I have no public stance on any candidate, just because I think it's really important that we keep that out of it, because in 2016 that was not kept out of it, and it caused some problems.
Yeah.
So, but my view on Steyer is, like Bloomberg, he's just going to spend as much money as he can, but he has done a really good job of hiring staff that looks like the state. And because he's centering climate change, that's very important to people in Nevada, because obviously we rely on the Colorado River, and we want to be leaders in solar. And if someone who centers climate change gets the nomination, that's going to be better, for us as a state and for the people of our state. But I haven't seen like a groundswell. I don't see his supporters out at events as much as I see other candidates' supporters. But I have seen his polling really go up now that he's, dumped a lot of money into advertising.
It does seem to be this interesting kind of juxtaposition of like your polling numbers and your event kind of like people who literally come out and show up and get fired up and are really enthusiastic. And I think maybe Steyer's the perfect example where he may not be filling stadiums and stuff, but maybe because his name recognition is now coming up so high because of all the marketing that, well, that gets you in the polls. And now look, he's going to be in the presidential January, Democratic National Committee debate, and Yang and people like Yang and Booker are not.
Right. I mean, his messaging is pervasive. My 7-year-old, when she sees his face, she goes, term limits, every single time. I mean, and that's what messaging does. But I also, I worked in communications as a volunteer, and it's disturbing to me a little bit, because if that's all it takes to get to 12% polling is all the money. I mean, it's the money in politics that real people very much dislike. And it's what people talk to me about at the door all the time. The money in politics is destroying a real discussion about issues.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it's I was in California around Thanksgiving, and we were there for a couple weeks, and it was amazing. I don't know, maybe it was just like the channel we were watching, maybe it was like Discovery Channel or something, but it felt like every commercial break there was a Steyer thing there. And this is like in the Bay Area, where I'm sure the media costs are not cheap. But he was just everywhere. And my kids were like, "Oh, Dad, like, who's this Steyer guy?" And I'm like, "Hey, be careful." We already picked our candidate. But it is a little disturbing that the guy who's put in like tens and tens of millions of his own money is going to be on the debate stage with, Warren and Sanders and Biden and Buttigieg and Klobuchar. And then the guy like Yang, who raised from 400,000 citizens, who's not a billionaire and is just a citizen entrepreneur who's like, hey, I see a problem, I want to be part of the solution, is excluded. It breaks my heart. Yeah.
Mine too.
Yeah. When you're talking to people in Nevada, when you're talking to people in Nevada, are they tuned in, or is it still too early? Are they going to kind of lean in more when we get closer to the caucuses and primaries?
So I'm basically only talking to nonpartisans right now. And that's just because the nature of my district is 27% nonpartisan. And I just want to hear what they care about. I'm not knocking their doors right now to convince them to vote for me. I'm just knocking to see what they care about. And they're very tuned in to national issues. Like, they were very tuned into impeachment. I knocked on like the second day of the impeachment hearings, and that was very interesting. Everyone had it on, which I was surprised.
Yeah.
Because you hear that people aren't really tuned in, but they are. And they're tuned in not to the minutia of the Democratic primary.
Yeah.
But it's because they're nonpartisans. In Nevada, they can't vote in the Democratic primary.
Right.
They technically can. There's same-day voter registration. They could show up at the primary, register as a Democrat, vote, and then go home and change it back to nonpartisan online, which is a change. That isn't how it used to be. And I actually encourage people who say that they have an interest in the Democratic primary, but they're nonpartisan. I say you should go register as a Democrat. Vote for who you want to see the Democratic nominee be, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to pick between the Democratic nominee and the Republican nominee.
Yeah.
If you want it to be somebody specific, then go vote for them.
So how hard is it to register as a Democrat the same day? Like, you have to go to a different office, or can you do it at the
it's at the caucus location. So, and we also have 4 days of early vote in caucus this time, which we've never had. And you go and you list your top 5 candidates in order. And then on the day of caucus, you don't have to be there. They'll have, your preference card. And they'll just go down your order of preference. If your top person is viable, then that's the person you'll be with. But if your top person's not viable, they'll just go down the list until they get to a viable person.
That's pretty cool. So you can do it. Yeah, you can do it early. So are you expecting pretty good turnout then, or what are your thoughts?
I hope so, because my thoughts about caucusing are that it's very disenfranchising, and it favors people that look like me, to be honest, because I was a stay-at-home mom for 7 years with my daughter, and it favors people who don't have to work on a Saturday. So it's very important, I feel, and the Democratic Party felt like it was really important to offer early vote for caucus. So I'm glad that that's going to be an option.
Yeah. I remember the first caucus I participated in, because previously I had voted in almost all presidential elections, but in the general and rarely in the primaries. But the first one I did was like in 2008, and I was caucusing for Obama at that time. But it was kind of chaotic. Like it wasn't like pull the lever. It was just a bunch of people in a basketball court. And it was a little bit, it was kind of cool though. It kind of felt very like authentic and very like old school democracy, and I kind of liked it, but I also felt like, wow, you really have to care to spend a couple hours at this place, and then I had to like give a little talk and stuff like that. So that was interesting. Yeah.
I mean, those are the pros to a caucus for sure. And you get to meet your neighbors.
Yeah. That was back when at that time I still remember there were concerns that, well, maybe Obama is like a double eight, like there's a conspiracy by the Republicans to support Obama to get the nomination because they know they can beat him.
Right.
And there was still a little bit of tension between the Obama and Clinton supporters at that time. But I wonder, like, I think even in this one, there's a little bit of tension between the camps. Have you observed any of those interactions between the various candidates' supporters?
I have. And I feel like because there's so many candidates, it's a little bit more diffused. In 2016, I mean, obviously we also had Martin O'Malley and Lincoln Chafee, but it was basically Clinton, Bernie. And there was a lot of tension because it was just the two.
Right.
And there's actually chants that break out at all the rallies now. And it's a Unity 2020 chant, because the Democratic Party message is, it does not matter who your candidate is. You must support whoever wins the primaries. Because, that was a big discussion topic, is some Bernie supporters in 2016 definitely voted for Trump. And I was just looking at some older articles about that. And we just can't have that. I mean, the stakes are way too high for that. And because there's so many candidates, the majority of people are not going to have their candidate be the nominee. So I think that makes it better, because it's not going to be like a 50-50 split. Yeah.
That's interesting that the rallying cry is around unity, I guess in July. And then now we're we're going through this debate, sort of qualification gate. Yes. And you've got a guy, I think Yang like held his own in the last debate. A lot of people thought he did pretty well. He raised more money than Biden did in the third quarter. Yang raised more in the fourth quarter than Biden did in the third. It's not bad for sitting, like, for if given that Biden's a sitting vice president or was a vice president. Mm-hmm. And but these polls, wow, these polls are just, they're gut wrenching. I thought we would have been higher by now, to be honest.
Yes, and I run into Yang supporters all the time. I love Yang Gang because I love that the hats say math. Math was my favorite subject in school, and I consider myself to be passionately optimistic about basically everything, but also sometimes depressingly pragmatic, because there is a definitive truth. You have to follow evidence. And, when you see the majority of people not even caring about what the truth is and what the evidence points to, sometimes that can be pretty depressing. But every time I've talked to Yang people, I had a great conversation with 4 supporters yesterday, and it's just topic based. Like, here's some topics. Here are Yang's position on these topics. Where is there room to argue, really? And like you said, I mean, I think that's the problem with how the media works, because it isn't going to be a substantive discussion of topics. So
yeah. I mean, when you even look at the nightly news, it's like 1 minute to the primaries, if that. They're not getting into the details, and so it's not surprising that some of these polls feel like they're kind of just locked in. Like, it's almost as if you just took a poll about name recognition, it probably would be correlated with the current polls on preferences.
Yes, it would.
Yeah,
I agree.
Now let's look at here's another form of a poll. It's not the traditional poll, but let's take a look at what people are searching for on the Google. So you've got here for the last 30 days, Buttigieg, Yang, Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Steyer, Warren. And what's interesting is that there are more people in the last 30 days searching for Andrew Yang than any other candidate. And then if you look at YouTube searches, it's not even close, right? The blue is Yang, and then the next one would be Warren. And then this is for United States overall, but if you go to, let's look at Nevada. I haven't done this, but let's take a look. Not a lot of data for Nevada, but almost no noticeable searches for, Steyer and Yang are the 2 people that are getting YouTube searched. And then on web searches, it's probably going to be a little more distributed. Yeah, then you've got, wow, yeah, Steyer is really getting a lot of people looking for him in Nevada. And then second would be Yang, and then Warren, Buttigieg, and Klobuchar. I mean, the thing that gets me when I look at this kind of thing is, like, if you could argue that lots of adults in America use Google for searching, and searching is an act of people's interest in learning more about a candidate. And here's the New Hampshire one. Yang's number 1 in the last 30 days. How is it that the number, at least one of the top 3, because I don't have Biden and Bernie here, but let's drop Klobuchar and be fair. So let's add Bernie Sanders. So no, Yang's still more than Bernie, and then we'll drop Buttigieg, which is the green. Drop Warren and add Biden. So we can just be conclusive here. Joe Biden. Okay. So now in New Hampshire, yes, more searches for Yang than any other candidate, full stop, in the last 30 days in New Hampshire. Wow. And yet the official Democratic National Committee debate will not have Yang. Like, And I get that they made up those polling rules earlier, and I appreciate, like, it's, you don't want to be seen changing the rules like a day before, but they haven't announced the qualification rules for the February debates. And I would argue if they do the same, like, oh, well, now you have to have 6% in 4 polls, and maybe there won't be 4 taken between the next now and the next debate. That's to be some BS, because it seems like people want to know more about Andrew Yang, and isn't a debate supposed to be a place where you learn more about candidates? Strange.
Right. I totally agree.
Yeah. So I don't know. Do you ever talk to, like, Democratic Party sort of members or activists or leaders? Like, what do they have an opinion on this stuff, or they're like, hey, that's done in DC. It's been etched in stone. It's.
Oh boy. There's a lot of opinions. So I spend a lot of time around Democratic Party people because I'm on the Central Committee, and there's just a lot of thoughts. But the thing that everyone can agree on is we don't want the party being who chooses, who people can know about. And so the way that I understand why that they have these increasing thresholds. It's because they have a vested interest in wanting less people on the stage. They want less people on the stage because they want each person to have more time to actually talk. But it's artificial, like they're doing it artificially.
Yeah.
Because like you said, if they did it organically about who people want to see more of, it wouldn't be the same people every time.
That's an interesting question. Like, as a thought exercise, if the poll, the way I've read the polls is they basically say, like, oh, well, if the election were held today, like, who would you support? And you give a name. But if they changed the question and they said, who are you, which of the following 5 or 6 or whatever are you most interested in learning more about in the next debate?
Right.
Like, I don't know if we need to, like, honestly, even though Biden's leading, like, I kind of know, I think a lot of people know about Biden. They know what he says. For Bernie, I mean, geez, like, we could almost recite his lines for him, right?
I mean,
so
it's true.
It might be like, you might see a world where people are like, well, yeah, I want to learn more about this Klobuchar. I want to hear what Booker has to say about these things. And I don't know. I wonder if it would result in very different in sort of qualification results for these debates. Hopefully the party is listening, and because if you want unity, I think people are ready to consolidate and converge behind whoever's the nominee in July, if we feel like it was a fair process. But if we feel like, well, it was kind of like, not rigged, but biased, let's say, I mean, I for sure will still vote blue because I really don't like the alternative.
Right.
But I don't know that I will really, like, write as many checks or make as many calls or shoot as many videos. Right. In whatever way everyone kind of participates. I think my enthusiasm would be a little bit lower if it were Biden, but kind of as a result of this weird process, versus Biden as a result of just a fair, kind of democratic, very transparent and open process. But we'll see, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that is the problem, because apathy is the problem. People feeling like everything is rigged, whether it is rigged or not. If people have the perception that it is, they aren't going to feel like their vote matters, and they're not going to work hard. Like you said, they're not going to go canvass for somebody if they feel like that person was picked by the party and not by the people of this country. So I know the DNC is working to make it more fair, but everyone at the DNC is also a human, and that they have their preferences.
Yeah. It's funny because on the other side of the aisle, I have multiple members of my family who are Trump supporters, and I got to tell you, they are fired up. They are. I feel like if they had to wait in line for 12 hours to vote for Donald Trump, they would do it. And I feel like they're more fired up now than they were back in 16, because for them it's all about sort of this sense of like they have to circle the wagons, that everybody is against them, that their candidate has never been given a chance, that the other party is just completely kind of to the most extreme of extremes, and they just feel like this existential threat, and they feel, and I also feel like a member of my family said to me, I can't wait to watch your live stream the day after the general election. And they're just like so just like it's so personal.
Yes.
And I worry we don't have that kind of like, we may not have that much enthusiasm on the Democratic side.
I think we do, but it's split amongst all the candidates right now. And so we really need to make sure it comes together, because I too come from a family with a lot of Trump supporters. I'm from South Carolina. So my immediate family has always been Democratic. My grandparents were like, blue dog Democrats, but basically everyone else in my family is a Republican. And I don't know if you saw the most recent Atlantic magazine, and it talks about how we're raising our boys and what's wrong with the messaging we're giving our boys. The messaging we're giving our boys gave us Donald Trump, because it's a zero-sum game. It's a game about winning, machoism. I mean, that's why his message resonates with all these people. It's not because he's the problem. He's a symptom of what we've done as a society. And like you said, him winning again isn't because he's doing something wonderful. It's because they just want him to win again, to vindicate themselves, because they're still pissed off that Obama won in 2012. And I'm not saying that's all his supporters. I see a lot of his supporters at the door, and they're not racists. They are not people that would go march in Charlottesville. They're people who own stock, and they own companies, and they're making a lot of money. And they've told me they know that they're selfish. They know that other people are suffering, and they don't care about that. And I think they do feel bad about it. But it's like, it's just American culture. I mean, walking in other people's shoes is not something we value. And that's sad, because it's something I value. And it's something all the Republicans in my family valued when I was younger. And now it's not a thing.
And I'm certainly sympathetic to the pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Like, this is a country where, people got in covered wagons and went west and literally hacked their life, a new life for themselves and for their family. And I certainly love that part of America, that sort of fighting spirit that like anybody can make it. But I also think like when you do look at the data, the amount of people like making it is not growing. It's sort of, getting smaller and smaller. And if you do make it, like, it's a huge win. But, I think most people would agree that if they have kids, they're not sure that their kid will be for sure better off than they are in the current generation. And that, like, if you ask someone probably in the 1800s or, 1900s, like, hey, do you think your kids will be better off than you? They probably like 100%, as long as they work hard and play by the rules.
Right.
But I don't think the data bears that out now.
It does not.
So, which is why, like, for the business owners, I kind of feel like Yang would appeal to them, because I don't think he's coming at them with pitchforks. I think he's saying, hey, for the system to be sustained and for your business to continue to thrive, we're going to need a floor so that people aren't completely, screwed by the changing economy. And you can still like live large, but everybody kind of needs to have some basic, foundation. That's all.
Yes.
So, So, but I guess everybody has mixed family. And I don't know about your Christmas dinner, but mine was really tough. Very difficult.
Ours was good because I have a 7-year-old. I feel like when you have children, it can kind of like draw the tension out.
Right. Yes.
Whenever like kids aren't involved and it's just a bunch of adults, that's always worse. So we actually had a good time, and you know, my husband and I were outnumbered significantly.
It was funny you mentioned a point. I haven't read that Atlantic article, although I definitely will as a father of 2 boys.
That's good.
But I'm not surprised about that argument, because at that dinner, one of my MAGA members of the family was like, "Oh, Tom, you know, you're such a snowflake. Like, why are you so offended by everything?" And I was like, "Look, man, I'm not offended. I just want to solve these problems. And I'm looking at the data and it looks like we have problems." And they're like, "Don't be a snowflake." And they like try to like kind of like get a rise out of you, but it's sort of it's sad, because it basically becomes, oh, if you're not for their candidate, you're somehow not masculine, not strong, not willing to make tough choices. And the reality is, I think like you can be strong, but nuanced, and think about things like a few steps ahead too.
Yes, I love the term nuanced, because that's what it is. I don't want to live in a black and white world. Like, the color in our world is what makes our world a place you want to be in.
Yeah.
If everything were black and white and there was, this is right and this is wrong. I mean, I do believe that there is a right, you know, but when you're looking at policy, it isn't just my way or the highway.
Yeah.
We have to build bridges. And one of the things that I actually love about Andrew Yang is he talks about the people who are inevitably going to be left behind when the economy shifts, because you can't stop the economy from shifting. You can't stop automation. But we have to look at people's humanity. Those are human beings. Those are people's families in West Virginia who have been miners their whole lives.
Yep.
And you know, the investment that our federal government and our state governments have to do in those people, it's because we care about them as people. It's not because we want to waste taxpayer dollars. You know, it's because we have people that live in this country and we care about them, and we don't want them to get left behind, because the economy is going to move anyway. And it's so funny, because that's always their point. Their point is always, you know, the economy and the invisible hand, and you can't, you know, we don't want any governments to mess with that. Well, if you want it to move, then you have to prepare people for that, because the economy exists because of humans.
Yeah.
So we need people to do the jobs. And if we just do nothing, then they're going to, you know, sink into depression. I mean, and I do a lot of thinking about addiction and recovery, because my oldest daughter dealt with meth addiction here in Nevada. And now she's an addiction recovery coach. And we talk all the time about, I mean, it's going to take a lot of coming at it on so many different levels, because addiction is, or can be, just a disease of despair. And if you feel like there isn't a reason to get up in the morning, there's not a reason to go to work. I mean, anyone who has ever been on drugs knows the way that makes you feel. Why would you want to go back to reality? If your reality is so depressing that you cannot deal with it, then why would you want to go back to it? So we have to make reality better with policies.
Yeah, I mean, sad as it is, I agree with you that there are probably cases where it's actually a completely rational choice to go down that path. And people have argued this for certainly like with inner cities and some African-American youth. The argument has been like, well, look, if you're an African-American male and you go to some crappy school and you don't see anybody getting reasonable jobs, like if there are other ways to earn a living that are not legal, it's not an entirely sort of irrational economic choice.
Right.
It's easy for us who have had privilege and resources and opportunities to say, well, I would never do that. Well, because you know what, you knew if you studied hard, you'd go to college and you'd probably get a good job. But not everybody has that path.
Right.
And I would not be surprised if the whole meth epidemic is influenced or at least accelerated by people's feeling like they don't have much of an upside if they, in general.
I think it is. And it's one of the reasons I decided to run, because I'm so lucky. I was raised by, a college professor and a guidance counselor, and had almost my whole family as educators.
Yeah.
Most people don't get that privilege. I mean, the privilege of everybody around you, like thirsting for knowledge and like feeding that to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I want, like you said earlier, you talked about laying a stable foundation for people. You can't go back and change the foundation that's been laid for children. If their foundation isn't laid properly, then how are they supposed to pull themselves up by their bootstraps? That's not possible. And so I think the work that we need to do, especially at the state level, because we are in charge of education, we need to make sure that that stable foundation is there for everyone. It's not just there for people who have, teachers in their family and who already have that privilege. And, we have a lot of discussions about charter schools in our state, because there's some really good charter schools in Nevada. And they are providing an alternative to people who feel like the public schools are not. But there's also some very good public schools. And I want to make sure the charter schools have standards, and I want to improve the public school system, which I think we can do. There's definitely data from all over the country that shows how we can do those things.
Yeah, 100%. So let's in a minute shift gears and talk about your candidacy. Before we do that, I just wanted to show two quick things. One is Twitter data, and the other one is I wanted to look at the debate and primary calendar together, because it's coming up faster than many of us might realize. So for the Twitter stuff, I'll just do a quick one here. Here it is. This is Yang, Buttigieg, Warren. And Yang is the red one in terms of total followers. Again, you'd see here, like if you looked at this, you would say, wow, that red line seems to be growing and closing the gap. We should hear more from that candidate at the next debate. Right? And then you'd be like, well, yeah, the blue line's kind of nice, but it's kind of flattening out. And the purple line for sure is a healthy one. And then this is sort of like daily new addition. So like, let's say on, if we move to say January 8th, Yang added 3,000 Twitter followers, Buttigieg 2,000, Warren almost 6,000. On January 9th, 2,000 versus 927 versus 4,000, and then 2,000 versus 1,000 versus 3,000. Like you could argue Yang is for sure in the running with Warren and Buttigieg on Twitter interest. And I understand, Twitter's not like the entire country, but it's not like some random website that only 1% of the people use either, right?
True.
Yeah.
True.
So at least when we look at the Google search, YouTube search, and Twitter data, it suggests that Yang is absolutely like in the running. And it's just a shame that the traditional polls are not reflecting that. And the other problem is that you raised, that we have so many national polls, but very few early state polls. And what I've heard the Democratic Party say, as well as the Republican Party, is like, hey, one of the benefits of Iowa and New Hampshire is anybody can run and you can do retail politics. And Iowan and New Hampshire voters take it really seriously, and they do a lot of homework, and they go out to the events, and they listen to all the candidates. Well, if that's the case, then why aren't you polling them?
It makes no sense. Like because I love data. And if you go back and look at what happened after Iowa voted in all the previous Democratic primaries, it changes everything.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't be focused on national polls at all when you're trying to set up the debates, because you never know what's going to happen. And if you just focus on national polls, then you're just saying the person with the most name recognition gets into the debate, and the person that doesn't have the name recognition doesn't. I really liked your idea actually about just changing the format of a couple of the debates coming up and saying, okay, we've seen these same people debate already. Why don't we do, like you said, a different way to get into debates that's based on public interest of wanting to hear their ideas?
Yes.
And then it might be different people in the debate, but at least people would get to see something different.
Yeah, like you could even focus it on, I've heard that like 40% are undecided, and even for the ones who are supporting, they're kind of like still up, you know, making up their mind. So you could say, okay, if you are undecided, you know, which of the following 6 or 7 do you want to learn the most about?
Right. Because that's
And
important. I mean, you want those people to get involved.
yeah. But you know, I guess we're not running the DNC yet. So, but hopefully someone who works in the party will hear these voices, because ultimately we all want the same thing. We want victory in November 2020. And why like alienate enthusiastic people who are going to roll up their sleeves in the general by having these kind of strange qualification rules? Because it doesn't cost them that much. Like, would it be the end of the world if they had a who do we want to learn more from debate? Like, what's it to them? Like, I don't know. So,
and like, we need all the different ideas. That's my favorite thing about this election cycle. Is these are different candidates. I mean, all of these candidates have different strengths and different areas that they've worked in, and they can bring different ideas to the table. And I really think that having Bernie in 2016, it did change the Democratic Party for the better.
yes.
Whether or not you know people wanted to support him, it always helps to bring in new ideas. You know, that was one of Donald Trump's biggest talking points. I'm not establishment Republican, and I've got all these new ideas, and I'm going to shake things up. Whether he actually did that or is capable of doing that, I very much doubt. However, people want that, you know, and it's never the safe candidate. Obama was not the safe candidate. John Kerry was the safe candidate, you know, like Bush wasn't the safe candidate. You can go back to the 60s. It's never the safe candidate. It's the candidate that can enthuse the most people. And like you said, if you lock people out of the discussion, then their supporters don't feel heard. And why would they care?
Yeah, totally. Well, let's take a look at the calendar, and then we'll get to the state Senate race that you're putting on yourself.
Yeah.
So here's the debate calendar. We got the Des Moines debate coming up just in a couple of days on Jan 14th, hosted by CNN and Des Moines Register at Drake. Then you've got Feb 7. In Feb, there's going to be 2, one in Las Vegas and one in Manchester, New Hampshire. Oh, there's going to be 3 in Feb. Wow. So
I didn't know that.
So this is a perfect example of why debate criteria are really crucial, right? Because if they pull the same stuff, basically they're going to force the field to narrow based on name recognition. And all those undecided and all those people that people want to learn more from, you know, may not get heard. And then in terms of, of course, the caucus and primary calendar, I mean, this is coming up fast. I mean, February is going to be an amazing month, right? You got Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina. Big time. Big time. And then, of course, you have Super Tuesday and March 3rd. So I guess we have to kind of buckle up, because February is going to be, I'm not going to say make or break, but if you're an outsider kind of insurgent candidate like Yang that's trying to shake things up, and you don't come through in Iowa, Nevada, or South Carolina or New Hampshire, like, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough sledding, which is why the fact that there are multiple debates in February gives opportunities to really have Yang's message, and any candidate who wants to get elected have their message heard. So hopefully everybody out there that's listening, I would encourage them to put some pressure on the DNC to really be very mindful of how the next round of debate criteria are set. And hopefully they'll hear that, wow, you know what? Like, even if it's just a perception of being biased, like, it's probably not going to be in the party's interest in the long run. So let's go out of our way and avoid any even appearance of bias and purposely make it so some of the smaller, lesser known candidates can be part of the process. And then, yeah, of course, if Biden or Sanders win, then I think more of us would be willing to kind of vote blue and lean into it in the summer.
Right.
Okay. So now, when did you decide to run, and why would any normal person want to run for office?
Well, that's one of the reasons I wanted to run, because normal people should run for office. The problems in our system are caused by normal people not running because they think it's not their thing. I thought that for a long time. I've always been a political junkie, and I thought, I'm going to work on people's campaigns. I'm going to be in the background. I'm going to work on causes that I care about. And then Donald Trump won in 2016. And I was like, I should stop telling myself I'm not qualified, because there are clearly no qualifications. No one wrote a book about what your qualifications have to be. And I had worked for so many candidates, and especially on field, I love knocking doors. I love talking to people. And it's one of the biggest complaints you hear from people. I don't know who my representative is. I want to talk to the person that's going to run for office in my district, and I want to know that person. And I just felt like, well, I can talk to all the people in my district. And I've been really involved, like following the legislature and going to hearings and testifying at hearings. And the work that really prepared me to run was with Moms Demand Action. It was not a natural fit for me. I'm an environmentalist. I'm a former teacher. I had never thought that gun policy was something, not that I didn't care about, but it was just something I didn't know a lot about. And then I got involved in Nevada. I got invited to an event that Shannon Watts was at, and I didn't know who Shannon Watts was. And I went and I met her, and then I started volunteering. And I mean, the more you learn about gun policy in this country, the more that it's super clear that we're on the wrong path. More guns do not make us safer. And we've all decided that there are people who shouldn't have weapons, prohibited purchasers. And if we've decided that, then why are we making it easier for them to get weapons? And so I learned so much. And a friend of mine, Stephanie Pizzaferrato, is the woman that Andrew Yang hugged in the audience when she was talking about losing her daughter.
Yeah.
And that moment of humanity from a candidate, it meant so much to her. And it meant so much to all of us, because that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. All of these people running for office, they have to have humanity first, and they have to be able to see other people's children as their children. And when someone tells you that their child died because of reckless behavior, and that there is something we can do about it, then you should care. And he's not the only candidate that has made a personal connection with her. Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris both listened to her at length, in private meetings, and talked to her. And that involvement that I had in Moms really just showed me that if you care about issues and you have the ability and the time to put into it, more people should run for office. I mean, there's a ton of local offices that right now the people winning them are just the people with the most money. They're the people with the most friends who have money. No one votes in local elections, especially municipal elections. And, we need to see that. And that's why I want to run, because I know that we can do so many things better. And if we know it and we see it happening in other states, then we can do it here. And our last legislative session was amazing. I loved it because we voted in so many new people, and we got progress made finally. And I think that we can continue that in 2021.
So what do you think are some of the most the hottest kind of topics or the most important issues facing Nevadans these days?
Water, because we live in a desert, and climate change. And I used to work for the Water Authority, and that's who regulates the water here in Southern Nevada. And I don't know if you've heard about the compact on the Colorado River, but it's a really huge thing. 7 states are involved in making policy for the river. And a huge deal was just signed last year to have everybody on the river reduce their use. And so that's something we're working on in Nevada. We've been working on it a long time. A lot of planning goes into it, like projecting 250 years out into the future. And in my district, there's a lot of well owners. They don't want to go onto city water. They want to keep wells. But if the aquifer goes dry, none of them will have water. So that's a big issue, is trying to manage the aquifer. And then schools are a huge issue. We have I believe it's the 5th largest school district in the country by population of students. There are 2 million, more than 2 million people in Clark County, and there's 1 school district. And it covers not just, urban Las Vegas, but Clark County is huge. So it covers all those rural schools up in Mesquite and out in Laughlin. There's a lot of discussion about breaking it up and what's best, and monetary policy for the school district. And a lot of people are really tuned into that in my district because there's a lot of teachers living here.
So it's one giant school district?
One giant school district, Clark County School District.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then, so then I would imagine at some point, if a district becomes too big, like it's hard to get stuff done, and it's hard to, like, what one neighborhood may not be the same as another. Like, what do you think should be done then?
I do agree that it needs to be broken up, but that has to be managed well. Because if it's not managed well, what might end up happening is that you'll get a school district that's just made up of people that don't have enough tax base for that school, or for all those schools in that area. And so it's going to have to be managed really well. There's plans, lots of plans have been made, but nothing's happened. And right now there's a lot of complaints that it's an administrative heavy school district. And so a lot of the money isn't going to teachers, it's going to the administration. So that's an issue. We have a strong teachers union, which is good. But yeah, and then healthcare. Healthcare is a huge issue in Nevada. And I believe that healthcare is a right. I don't necessarily think Medicare for all is the solution. I'm not a policy expert on it, but what I do know is every person has to be able to go to the doctor and have it covered. And a public option has to be on the table. Even if the public option is offered by the states and not the federal government, we have to have a public option that is not based on Medicaid requirements.
Right. And one of the things that I was glancing at the chat discussion has popping up is the gun issue, which you brought up as something you were involved with in the beginning of your move to public service. And I was just curious, like, I'm sure Nevada has people on both sides of that issue.
Oh yeah.
And I've heard the argument that there was a shooting in a church recently, and there were some armed parishioners or people attending service, and it's possible that had they not been armed, maybe more people would have been harmed. What's your take on the whole good guys with guns versus bad guys with guns argument?
I hear that almost every time I bring this up with voters. And my retort to that is, I'm not agreeing with you that that's the solution, good guys with guns. But if that is your solution, then we have to do something to keep guns out of the hands of bad guys. I don't believe that there are bad people and good people. So I don't really like that, whatever you would call it, that phrase. But what I do know is I see their point. The point is, if you've got somebody that's a trained concealed carry permit holder, that person can make people safer. And I do believe that. But the problem is, you've got states like Arizona where you don't even have to do anything to get a concealed carry permit. It's called a permitless carry state. So you can just concealed carry. You can be blind and concealed carry in Arizona. There are no standards. And a lot of states accept other states' concealed carry permits. And Nevada accepts Arizona's concealed carry permits. But if you're not doing a permitting process, then you're basically saying any person, you don't know where they got their weapon, any person can concealed carry on the strip. where millions of people come to visit every year. 50 million people came through our airport this year or last year. So I don't believe that makes people safer. That's not to say that I disagree with people who are trained carrying. I'm not an anti-gun person. My husband was in the Air Force and my stepson was in the Army. I believe that if people, are not prohibited purchasers and there's not a reason for them not to have weapons, then they should be able to get weapons. But if you're a domestic abuser, if you are a person who's been adjudicated mentally incompetent, there is no reason for you to have a weapon, especially domestic abusers. That's a huge issue. Nevada has the third highest rate of domestic homicide in the country. And we did make some strides in this last legislative session. I believe every gun sale should have a background check. Right now, we just closed that loophole, but a lot of states still allow private gun sales among people that met on the internet. How are you supposed to know if that person has a restraining order?
Yeah.
You wouldn't know if you didn't do a background check. So there are so many common sense ways to come at this issue. The police in my area are working on they're working on safe storage. So criminals a lot of times get their weapons from stealing them from people's houses and cars. There's a lot of people in my area who keep a loaded weapon in their nightstand.
Yeah.
You're just inviting people to come and take it from you. Everyone's weapon should be in a safe and stored separately from ammunition, not just to prevent theft, but to prevent unintentional shootings by children, teen suicide. There's a lot of issues, and we did address a lot of them in Nevada this cycle, but state by state is not going to cut it. We need federal legislation.
Yeah, this is an interesting topic because for me, as a gun owner, before I purchased my pistol, I did like a weekend of like safety training.
Right.
And what was interesting was that the instructors were saying, "Oh, it's so great that you're doing this." I was like, "Yeah, well, it's kind of like the deal I made with my wife that I wouldn't wouldn't go buy this thing if I didn't know how to use it," kind of thing.
And no one should, right?
Right. And he was like, "Yeah, well, most people don't do that. They just go buy one and put it in their nightstand."
Yeah.
And the other thing was, so like I got like a safe that had a fingerprint reader and I tried to take all these precautions, but it's amazing that like we don't let people like drive a car without taking a driving test. But you pick up a Glock in some states on the same day and you're off to the races, So yeah, I mean, I also appreciate how the people who are very big on the Second Amendment, like they do worry about the slippery slope and like this is the one way that we can hold government kind of like accountable if ever the government becomes too strong. But I don't know, the government has some pretty heavy duty hardware these days. Like I'm not sure your Smith & Wesson is going to do it. Like
no,
great manufacturer, but like when an M1 Abrams comes rolling down your street.
Well, and that's if I'm really interested in reading what the founding fathers said themselves. And I'm actually reading the Federalist Papers right now. And you have to take into account that, first of all, these were all white men and all wealthy white men. And they lived in a time when you got angry with someone, you challenged them to a duel and then you shot each other. Like you have to take into account where they were in time. And they also wrote this right after the American Revolution. I mean, to them, the kind of weapons that were available were muskets. You shot one, you had to pull it back here, you had to do that. It took minutes to put extra bullets in there. And now we have weapons with 100 bullets in one clip. So I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe that it says people have a right to a weapon, but there's a lot of rights in the Bill of Rights, and they don't come without limitations of some kind. The First Amendment has limitations. This is why we have laws, so that you can sue people for libel. And, there are limitations to the Second Amendment, and they involve safety for our community. And, community safety is one of my issues that I have the most experience with. So I look forward to being there and adding to that discussion.
Yeah, you brought up a good point about sort of the Second Amendment was in 1791.
Right.
This is what they were talking about, like a little, and they had the musket, but I think they were still like barrel loaded, like kind of black powder type stuff. And the stuff you get now, I mean, I've been in some gun ranges and I've used some of that more heavy duty stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy powerful.
It is.
And I'm glad I don't have one in my house. But it's definitely not like a musket. And to your point, I wonder if the founding fathers, if you told them like, okay, well, would this apply to like some crazy musket that can shoot, multiple rounds a second and you can mow down a whole crowd anytime you want. I don't know if they would. I wonder. I guess we can't go back in time. We'll never know.
Can't. They did so much insight. It has been really amazing to read the Federalist Papers now. Some of the paragraphs, they sound like they're about Donald Trump. I mean, if you took them out of context and you changed the English a little bit so it was more modern English, anyone could have written it today. Especially the Federalist Papers that are about impeachment. It's very interesting. And, I don't want to take law-abiding people's guns away. I don't want to do that. And no common sense person does. I want to keep my child safe. I want to keep everyone else's children safe. And we have seatbelt laws,
Yeah.
We didn't before, and thousands more children died a year because we didn't have seatbelt laws. I mean, it's common sense.
Yeah, where was I? I was in Florida around the holidays. I don't know if they have a helmet law. I saw a lot of people on motorcycles with no helmets. Do you know? I thought that was like just a normal thing now that everybody should wear helmets, but maybe there are certain
state by
states where you
state.
don't.
Yeah, helmet laws are state by state.
But I mean, I think that's another example where I get the guy wants his freedom. And it was a nice day and he had a really nice bike. And so I was like, yeah, I can see why you'd want to do that. But on the other hand, like if he takes a spill on the highway, it's lights out. But maybe that's his choice. And, at any rate. All right. So now let me ask you, Liz, I know we're running a little short on time, but I did want to kind of get your take on like, what's it been like being a candidate? I mean, when I hear people running for office, my impression is like, oh my God, that's like the most thankless job. And people are just going to attack you and your family. And it's going to be bad for everyone. And who knows if you can get anything done. So what's your angle on? Like, how do you, now you're out there, you're doing it. And so first of all, I want to take my hats off. Like, I think it's amazing. And that is, I think, the founding fathers' idea that people like, it wasn't like a job. It wasn't like a lifelong career that you would literally serve for a little bit and then kind of rotate back out into your normal life.
Yes.
What's it been like for you?
I've really enjoyed it. I'm a social person, and it has been, your allocation of time is what's interesting, because I know a lot of people who run for office and they have full-time jobs. I am extremely lucky that I don't have to have a full-time job. My husband works from home. We can share responsibilities with my daughter more than a lot of people can. And I had gone back to work for a year part-time when she started when she started first grade. And then when I decided to run for office, I quit with the support of the people at my job. And I do not understand how people run for office with a job. I don't know how that's possible, because the amount of time you have to spend networking is immense. And if you really want to resonate, or if you want your message to resonate, you have to talk to people.
Yeah.
You have to be at events, and it's a huge time suck. But I love it. And I think my favorite part about it is talking to people about things they care about. Because at the end of the day, if you want people to vote for you, then they need to be invested in, why you're in this race. And I love talking to people about things that matter to them, because it is our community. And like I said, one of the biggest things people talk about is the money in politics ruining that, because then if you just have people that are there because of all these big donations, and then once they get up there, the only people they want to help out are the people that gave them the huge donations, that, it muddies the system, and it's gross. It's what people don't like. And when you hear jokes about politicians, that's always what it's like. But really, like you said, the founding fathers wanted regular people to be in these positions because that's who knows what's going on in the community, and that's who can, lead from experience. So I've enjoyed it. The area I'm running for is, it's a very interesting part of Las Vegas. It's in the Northwest Valley, and there are a lot of like acre properties. People who've never been here probably don't know that a lot of people here ride horses, and there's like a real Western culture in parts of the valley. And my little Senate District 18 has that culture, but it also has a lot of new build. And so there's a lot of high density construction. Houses here are very close together. All the new houses, people sometimes don't realize that. And so that's butted up against, you'll have a 5-acre horse property next to houses that are on less than a quarter of an acre. And so that's a little bit of the tension in my area that happens. But I have just, found it to be a nice experience. I only have 10 more months. But the biggest thing that is hard is the money raising. And I'm focused on small dollar donations from people who know me, because I don't want to be beholden to anyone. And I won't be, even if I have to get money. A lot of unions give, the max you can give here is $10,000, which is a lot because the federal max is 2,700.
Yeah.
And when you've got a situation where dark money can come in, and one person can have 4 different PACs and can give you $40,000, that's scary to real people who live somewhere. So I really focused on getting donations from real people, and I'm going to make every one of those dollars count. I'm going to be on a shoestring budget, and I'm going to be knocking everyone's door. If anybody wants to donate, they can visit votelizbecker.com. Every bit counts. I haven't actually run the numbers on what my average donation is, but I've got about 14 people that give monthly, and they give, $20 a month to $50 a month. And then I've got people that have $5 to give, and they give $5, and I'll take it.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible that that people can give up to 10,000.
It's a high.
Why do they let people give that much?
I don't know how that got set as the limit. And I should go and look at when that got set, because the rules are always changing, and I don't know when that became the limit. It's $5,000 for the primary and $5,000 for the general. So if someone gives you $10,000 and you lose the primary, you have to give $5,000 back.
Got it. And so what's your primary like? How many people are running? And
there is no one else in the Democratic primary. So
for sure, you'll be the Democratic nominee. And does the district typically flip-flop, or is it usually one party or another? Or are you?
There's about a 3.6% advantage, and the district was just created in 2011. So after the census in 2010, this district was created. So the person that's in the seat now has always had the seat, and he's a Republican. And while there's a 3.6% registration advantage for Republicans, we just passed legislation that just went into effect on January 1st that registers everyone to vote when they turn 18. And everyone who goes to the DMV to get a new license when they move here is registered. And all the numbers are pointing to the majority of people want to be nonpartisan. The majority of people are not registering as Democrats or Republicans. So my district's 27% nonpartisan.
Wow.
And that's probably just going to continue to go up.
Wow. And do you have, are there polls being conducted? Like, what kind of data can you look at to know?
There have not been polls in my district yet. There will be. It's pretty early. Right now, everybody in the Democratic Party, for the most part, is focused on the caucus. once the caucus is over, filing for my race is actually the beginning of March. So if another Democrat was going to jump in, they technically have until March 13th to do so. I don't think they will, but you never know. And I don't know if he's going to have a primary because, we won't know until March 13th. Yeah. So we'll see.
Why do you think there aren't more people running?
I think that in this particular district, Democrats have kind of been resigned that we can't win it because of this registration advantage. But in 2018, one of the assembly districts that's inside my district that had always been Republican flipped Democrat by 124 votes. Wow. And it's because she knocked every single door. And I helped her. I knocked doors for her, and we're going to kind of run together as a team. Her name is Connie Monk. She had a great session last session, and the other assembly district in our area is much more Republican. So of the two assembly districts that make up my Senate district, one of them has a higher Republican registration advantage. And so I don't know that a Democrat's even going to run in that one this time.
And do you, how many people are in the district? Like how many doors do you have to knock on?
There are 86,000 registered voters, and that's probably going to be closer to 88,000 by the time voting occurs.
Right. And you're gonna are you able to get a list to focus on the independents and Democrats, or?
I do. Yeah. I'm sure you've heard of Van. It's what the Democrats use. It's an organizing tool. So I use Van, and you can sort it anyway. It's very interesting. Van is a data lover's dream because you can get in there and you can say, I only want to talk to nonpartisans that just registered to vote, or I only want to talk to nonpartisans who voted, in this election cycle or these couple election cycles. Or you can go talk to newly registered Democrats, really any category of people.
Wow, that must be so interesting. And then, I guess with the newly registered, you wonder, well, are they going to show up? Are they going to deliver, versus the ones that have a history of coming out and voting when the time comes. Because I was just looking at the turnout rate on comparing different countries. And the US, it's such a shame, as a place that kind of has been a defender of democracy in so many places around the world. Our actual turnout is only about half, which is kind of sad. That half of the people who are eligible don't go,
It is sad. And like we were talking about before, it's tied to the fact that people feel that their vote does not matter. But in these local races, every vote counts. There was a state Senate race last time in 2018 that was lost by 23 votes. And there have been ties for our municipal elections multiple times in the last 20 years that were decided by a card draw, because that's how we break ties in Nevada. We don't use a coin, we use a deck of cards. And so I know someone who lost a race because of a card draw. So I feel like if people really knew those down ballot races, how close they are, there would just be much more, reason to turn out.
Yeah. And the last thing I was curious about before we wrap up, Liz, is, your mention of the dark money and the $10,000 donations, in your district, what do you think is the risk for the residents and the citizens there? What special interests do you think are interested in influencing or having someone that they have strong influence over? That would what are the things that they're trying to change?
Well, we have Sheldon Adelson. So he, lives in Nevada. He is a very big donor to most Republicans. My opponent got $40,000 from Sheldon Adelson last cycle, which was 2016, the last time he had to run. And because of the rules, it doesn't say Sheldon Adelson gave him $40,000. It's his PACs that he set up that gave him that money. And so obviously he owns a casino. So the casino industry gives money, Democrats and Republicans, because it's very varied who owns casinos in Nevada. But there's those people that didn't sound there's that constituency. We also have hard rock mining, and mining gives a lot of money. But we have really strong unions here, and a lot of people across the country don't know that about Nevada. But the culinary union, SEIU, teachers union, all the different construction trade unions are very strong here as in comparison to other states. And so a lot of those unions will max out on people as well, because, fair wages are very important to them. Very important to me. I feel that having strong union membership really raises the boat for everybody. And so who else? There's environmental groups that give a lot of money here.
Yeah. I don't know if you have a strong thoughts on the Yang sort of democracy dollar kind of proposal. Yeah. But one of the things I like about it is that, as much as I don't love Sheldon kind of having that much influence, it was funny. I did an interview with a guy who was on Nerds for Yang, who was talking about Israeli politics, and he's Israeli. And he was like, well, like in Israel, there's like one really conservative newspaper that everybody reads, and it's actually owned by an American by the name of Sheldon Adelson. And I was like, no way.
Yeah. He owns our newspaper. He owns the Las Vegas Review-Journal.
Crazy. Yeah. So as much as I don't love any folks, even unions or pro-environmental groups, I feel like I don't like any one or small group having outsized influence. I'd rather have it as distributed and spread out as possible.
Right.
Because who knows? Maybe the teachers union, of course, is going to be pro-education, but they may have different views on school choice or different school regulations than I might have, even though I consider myself pro-education too. But that's the world we are in now, where probably a lot of these small, highly concentrated sources of funds probably have way more influence than maybe they should.
Yes, I agree. And I love the democracy dollars idea, because it also fights apathy.
Yes.
If people know that everyone has the same input, then why it makes you less likely to be apathetic. And there's real reasons people have apathy. There's real reasons they think their vote doesn't count, because in some states it doesn't. And we need criminal justice reform badly. And we passed some bills last session, but countrywide, there's people being taken off the rolls for no reason other than that they're inactive. That would be like saying, the Y or the gym canceling your membership because you didn't come. They would never do that. So why would you be taken off the voter rolls? And the democracy dollars is just such a good idea, because it evens out everyone's influence. Because right now, obviously, there are people that have undue influence, and we don't want that. We should not want that. Democrats and Republicans and independents, no one should want that.
Yeah, and the fact that it would only cost $20 billion a year out of a $4 trillion federal budget seems like it's totally doable. And the impact could be dramatic. Of course, like a basic income would be transformational. But if you looked at like the cost, the return on investment, and the potential for getting strong bipartisan support, I could argue the democracy dollars is like the dark horse that could really be one of the biggest impacts of the Yang candidacy than anything else. But I guess we'll see. Well, before we wrap up, Liz, is there anything else that you wanted to share with the audience about the general election, or sort of the presidential primary, but moreover about your candidacy? Because we've really enjoyed the chat. I know everybody's been we have a lot of concurrent viewers that have been staying on, so they must be liking what they're seeing and learning more about what you're up to. What would you like to share with them?
I would like to share that no matter where you live, because I know most of you don't live in Nevada, Get involved in your local races if you can, because the presidential race definitely matters. You know, the future of our country is dependent upon this presidential race. But local issues are really what affect you in your state the most. And one of the things that happens is when, you know, in presidential years, there's a higher turnout, but down ballot, people don't fill out all the races. So even if you can't get involved with the campaign, make sure you do the research and you vote for people that you want representing you, because it can make all the difference. When you have an issue and you want to be able to call your representative, if you have, you know, talked to that person at the door or seen that person on the ballot, you're going to feel that it's easier to go to that person. And I want people in Nevada to feel that way about me. I want them to know that they can come to me at any time. I am not going to be bought by anyone. I love Nevada. Home Means Nevada is our state song, and it truly is that for me. My husband and I have raised our children here. I'm never leaving here. I don't, you know, have any desire to ever leave. And so get involved in your races. If you live in Nevada, visit my website, and visit the websites of the people that are running in your districts, because we can all use your help. If you don't have money to give, we can use your help door knocking, we can use your help calling, or just spreading the word amongst people that you know. So thanks.
Excellent, Liz. And what's your position on people who are not in your district, who just like what you're saying, donating a few bucks? Is how do you
I would love
that?
it. Right now I'm up to 17 states. So I've got donations from 17 states. Like I said before, I'm from South Carolina. I went to college in Virginia. And I've got friends all over the country. And I tell people all the time, it's not, money in politics isn't awful if the money that's coming in is because people are investing in something that they believe in. Money in politics is bad when people are trying to buy someone's vote for something. Donations from people that agree with you are saying, I want to invest in this thing that I agree with you on. And so I welcome donations from anyone who would like to see a positive change, because that's what I want to see.
Excellent. Well, I will. You may see a small donation from me.
Thank you, Tom.
Later today. And I think if anybody is also thinking about it, what we need in this country are more reasonable, thoughtful, nuanced thinkers who care about their country and their family and are not demonizing the other side.
Right.
And my read, just from our brief conversation, is you care about the environment, you care about education, you care about families having a safe environment to grow up in. And you sound like someone who's not like hardcore, like an extreme one way or another. Yes. And that's, oh God, I wish we had more of that in this country. I mean, when you watch national politics, it's just so disappointing. So maybe at least we can get good local representatives. And someday, you know, those local representatives are also, you know, arise to other roles. And so I'm very grateful that you spent time with us, Liz. And I'm so thrilled that you're helping out with the caucuses in general. And you're watching it with as much interest as all of us are. And hopefully we'll have you back on the show very soon.
I would love it. I would love to come back on after the caucuses to digest.
Oh, we should totally do that and figure out, like, okay, well, what happened? What was your observation? And then at that point, you might be able to speak a little more freely, because you won't be like part of the organization. It'll be all done. And
that is very true.
You can share some stories with us.
I would love to.
I love it. Well, for everybody else who are NFL fans, please enjoy the Seahawks game. I know we all are supporters of the America's real team.
I'll tell my husband you said so.
Tell your husband I said that Andrew Yang is like the Russell Wilson of 2020.
Okay, I'll tell him.
And with that said, I will say goodbye, nerds. Do you want to say goodbye, nerds, to our audience, Liz?
Goodbye, nerds. It was lovely.
Keep it real, guys.
Bye.